Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the fourth out of six webinars in this webinar series. In this webinar, we will be talking about a plant based dietary pattern for weight management in elite athletes. My name is Addie Lears. I'm a graduate student at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. I did my graduate capstone research on weight management practices in elite athletes. So I'll just be sharing some of the research that is out there on a plant based dietary pattern in athlete populations. As always, we have our learning objectives. So, objective one will be to be able to define a plant based eating pattern in terms of weight management. Objective two, be aware of the research that is currently available on the use of a plant based eating pattern to assist with weight loss, weight maintenance, and weight gain. And objective three, understand the impact a plant based eating pattern can have on body composition and athletic performance. So, what exactly does it mean to be following a plant based eating pattern? Overall, a plant based eating pattern emphasizes eating fresh or minimally processed foods while either limiting or totally excluding meat, eggs, and or dairy products. So there are varying degrees of plant-based eating that exist. There's probably lots of names you've heard. Veganism is the most strict out of these plant based eating patterns. So, this is where one totally excludes meat, eggs, dairy products, possibly even honey. Then it goes to vegetarianism. Again, there's many forms of vegetarianism. Generally speaking, it excludes meat, and then some types allow eggs and or dairy. And then there's also plant-based eating patterns which just limit animal-based food products, so not totally excluding, just limiting the amount of meat or dairy, eggs they eat. So there's many reasons why someone may want to eat a plant-based eating pattern. For instance, environmental reasons, ethical reasons, possibly due to religious or spiritual beliefs, aesthetic reasons, or even general well-being, as there have been many documented health benefits associated with a plant based eating pattern, such as reduced chronic disease risk. So, when we look at research on a plant based eating pattern for weight loss, there's actually not a lot of information out there, which is surprising because a plant based eating pattern is commonly used for weight loss, as it does increase or encourage consumption of more high fiber foods and low energy dense foods, which can help create a more filling feeling. So you might not eat as much. So that's why it is associated with weight loss more often. So there is a review that evaluated 19 studies that all assess the effects of different plant-based diets on weight and BMI, so body mass index. Results of this study found that plant-based diets did improve weight status in some patient groups. However, none of these studies actually examined the effects of a hypocaloric plant-based diet on weight status in elite athletes. Again, that hypocaloric diet meaning less calories than one needs to maintain their weight. So, our key takeaways then for a plant based eating pattern for weight loss, and there's not any research out there that looks at the effects of a hypocaloric plant based diet on elite athletes' body composition, performance, and nutrient intake. We are kind of concerned a little bit with plant based dietary patterns, especially the more strict ones that exclude animal products, such as veganism, as it may be more challenging to get adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals in. So, a lot of vitamins and minerals, such as iron, calcium, vitamin D, B12, and riboflavin, come from animal based products primarily. So, it is a little bit more challenging to get adequate amounts of these. However, that being said, it is generally considered a safe dietary pattern for the general public to follow. And just like we discussed on the last slide, there has been positive effects shown by following a plant-based diet. So overall, a plant-based dietary pattern can help with weight loss as the diet promotes consumption of more of those high fiber foods and low energy dense foods, which can help you feel more full while eating a lesser amount. Next up, we're going to switch our focus to research on a plant based dietary pattern for weight maintenance. So, we're going to look at two studies that have been published in the last couple of years here. The first of those was published in 2016 by Lynch and colleagues, so the study on the left. So, this study sought to discover the effects of a vegetarian diet compared to an omnivore diet on adult endurance athletes' body composition and performance. So, an omnivore diet just means that one is consuming both plant and animal products. So, this study had 57 endurance athletes as their participants. They were both males and females, omnivores and vegetarians. So, this study looked at the participants' normal intake over the course of 7 days. Then they brought the participants in to have testing done on one day. And on these testing days, the participants had their body composition measured and then they had their performance assessed. And this was done by looking at their maximal oxygen uptake. Participants also performed a series of leg extensions and flexions where they completed 3 maximal effort repetitions. So, results of this study found that both diet groups had a comparable strength, even though the vegetarian diet group had significantly lower body mass and lean body mass. The vegetarian diet group had significantly higher maximal oxygen uptake, and this was predominantly seen in females. Calorie and fat intake were similar between the two dietary groups. However, the vegetarian diet group had a higher intake of carbohydrates, fiber, and surprisingly iron, whereas the omnivore group had higher intakes of protein, saturated fat, cholesterol, and B12. However, I do want to point out that even though the omnivore group overall had higher intakes of protein, when protein intake was expressed relative to their body mass, so as, grams per kilogram of what they weigh, there were actually no differences found between the group's dietary protein intake. Therefore, researchers concluded that based on their findings, following a vegetarian diet may adequately support strength and cardiorespiratory fitness development and may even be advantageous for supporting cardiorespiratory fitness. The next study we're going to look at is on the right-hand side. This was published a few years later, so in 2019 by Neville and colleagues. So these researchers wanted to look at the exercise capacity of vegans, lacto-ovo-vegetarians, which means it includes both eggs and dairy products, and then omnivorous diet. So they compared these 3 diets in recreational runners. So they had 24 vegan runners, 26 lacto-ovo-vegetarian runners, and then 26 omnivorous runners. They had an equal distribution of men and women. So just like the last study, the participants ate their normal intake before the testing days, and this was assessed. However, unlike the last study that looked at their intake for 7 days before, this study only looked at 1 day before. So when the participants came in for testing, they again had their body composition measured and they have the performance measured. But instead of looking at maximal oxygen uptake, this study looked at overall exercise capacity. Results of this study found that there were no significant differences found in maximum exercise capacity between vegan runners, lacto-ovo-vegetarian runners, and omnivorous runners. So this is opposite to what the study on the left-hand side found for their results. So that makes it not clear whether following a plant-based dietary pattern can produce beneficial results for an athlete's performance. However, what we do know from these studies and what the results demonstrate is that a plant-based dietary pattern does not appear to have negative effects on an athlete's performance. Again, we want to ensure, though, that we have adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals, especially those that I brought to attention earlier on in this presentation. We also need more long-term intervention studies to get a better understanding of how a plant-based dietary pattern would impact an athlete's performance and body composition in the long term. Because again, these studies only looked at participants' intake for a day to several days rather than months. We're also going to talk about the research on a plant based eating pattern for weight gain in this webinar. So, I know plant based eating is more commonly thought of for weight loss and weight maintenance. Some people may be interested in using a plant based eating pattern even when they need to gain weight. Currently, though, there are no studies available that have examined the effects of a plant based diet on weight gain in either the general public or in the athlete population. However, what we can take away from plant based eating for weight gain is that it may be a little bit more challenging to meet energy and nutrient needs for a caloric surplus. So, getting above what you need to maintain weight. So, as an athlete already, you have such high energy requirements. And then put on top of that, the energy requirements you need to gain weight. It may be hard to get that through these lower energy density foods and high fiber foods that are common with a plant based diet. Therefore, recommend that you eat frequent meals and snacks and try to select those high energy dense foods. So, things like peanut butter, nut butter, avocado, olive oil, all of those, higher calorie foods that don't have as much fiber in them, because fiber can ultimately prevent or help you become more full. So we want to prevent that early onset of fullness when gaining weight. So when we put it all together, again, taking it for weight gain, weight maintenance, and weight loss, research is really lacking still regarding the effects of a plant based eating pattern on elite athletes' performance and body composition. From the research that is available, though, it does appear that a plant based eating pattern does not have a negative impact on performance. However, I really want to hone in on the point that, whatever degree of plant based eating one chooses to follow, we really do need to ensure that we're still getting those adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals that we need just for being able to train at such a high level and just to even function as a normal human being. So again, those are iron, calcium, vitamin D, B12, and riboflavin are really the ones we want to pay attention to if somebody decides to go on a plant-based eating pattern. And a plant-based eating pattern may be preferable for weight maintenance and weight loss, but again, may be more challenging for weight gain just because it may be harder to get in all the necessary calories and nutrients you need. Things to consider before starting a plant based eating pattern. So, you really want to think about what your reason is for wanting to start a plant based eating pattern. So, I know we went over a few reasons at the beginning of this webinar, but we really want to watch out for wanting to start a plant based eating, especially if you have a history of disordered eating, as vegetarianism is a socially acceptable way to restrict intake. So, really think of the why behind, why you want to do it. Also, thinking about will you be able to make meals and snacks that still provide you the amount of calories, protein, vitamins, and minerals you need? So, is it possible, for you to either limit or exclude animal products and still get in your usual daily amount? Also, it doesn't need to be a cold turkey change. You can have gradual changes to your diet. If you really are interested in wanting to make these changes, limiting animal based product consumption, it doesn't have to happen overnight. You can start, limiting that kind of either week by week, month by month, doing a meatless Monday, just something that's going to help you make these changes for what's going to be right for you and good for your body. And as always, discuss your weight management plan with your sports dietitian. So if you are curious about making these gradual changes to your diet, talk with them and see what will be feasible for you. As always, feel free to email me with any questions you have. My email is listed on the slide here, addison.lears99@gmail.com. Some references if you want to do some more digging into the research that is available. And then our webinar assessment tool. So when you're ready, press pause, and you can write down your answers for these 5 questions. Once you're ready, then hit play, and it will take you to the end of this webinar, which will be the webinar assessment tool answer key. And as always, tune into our next webinar that will be discussing a high energy dense and low energy dense diet. Have a great rest of your day.